Welcome to the Commonwealth Club World Affairs of California. I'm Michelle Meow, a member of the Board of Governors and also a producer of a program here called The Michelle Meow Show. It's your A through Z covering the LGBT, LMNOP, and everyone in between. Thank you so much for all of you who are here with us here in person and also online. This conversation tonight had come together not whimsically, obviously. I think for many of you who have been tuning into the news, we've heard the headlines. We've heard of the students whose visas have been revoked, who have been detained, who are a part of cases in which it's questionable if they'll be here with us or be deported. We've heard from families who've been separated. We've heard children, U.S. citizens who are children of folks who've been also deported. We've heard from community members, neighbors. We've heard from parents or grandparents. It almost feels like we've heard from everyone who's been affected by the actions of the federal government as it pertains to our immigrant, migrant communities. And so tonight you'll hear from speakers who are out there, who are working with our community members in trying to protect and keep them safe. I got to take a moment to breathe a little bit because it is pretty heavy. So if you need a moment to breathe, feel free to do so. We have a Zen garden up in the rooftop. If you need gender-neutral bathrooms, are on the third floor. Single-stalled gender-neutral bathrooms. Bathrooms also are right outside the door here. Just some housekeeping items. Please silence your phones. We are recording this for broadcast. And so without further ado, I think I'm done and I'm ready to introduce our program. Our first speaker is the director of the Human Rights Commission, and thank you to the Human Rights Commission and San Francisco Pride for supporting this program and bringing our community members together for this important discussion. And so let's welcome Director Mouli Tebenya.
Thank you, Michelle. Good evening, everybody. I'm gonna take my glasses off. The lights are pretty bright up here. But I'm really honored to be with all of you advocates, organizers, neighbors who have gathered today with purpose and intention and unity. And, I think all of us have asked ourselves over the last several months, what can we do? What can we do to protect LGBTQ rights? What can we do to protect women's rights? What can we do to protect the unity and dignity and the rights of our immigrant neighbors? And so I think tonight we're going to be able to start to get some answers to those questions together. And I told my staff this story the other day, and I wanted to share it here this evening as well. In 1990, I was 8 years old when anti-apartheid leader Nelson Mandela, former president of South Africa, came to the United States to thank us for everything that we did to support the anti-apartheid movement. And in June of 1990, he came to the Oakland Coliseum. And my father is an immigrant from Ghana, West Africa. And so he, as he always does, he brought us to everything, to community meetings, to city council meetings. And so this was, just another thing. And he dressed us up in our traditional clothes, and we went to the stadium. I didn't really know what I was getting into, but I walked into the stadium, and the energy, the love, the joy that was in that stadium is something I'd never felt before. I had been to the stadium before to watch the Warriors play, or next door, or watch the A's play. But that energy, that was something that I had never felt before. And that's where I really learned what sort of collective people power could do when people join together and we work towards a common cause. That was the moment that I had really learned that. And I think if we continue that energy, we continue to work together, we'll be able to sustain this period and come out on the other end stronger. And so as now, all these years later, as the director of the Human Rights Commission, I'm so honored to be able to support all of you, support the city in fighting back and supporting our immigrant neighbors. And I'm thrilled to be here and thrilled to welcome this really thoughtful and insightful and experienced panel to give us some information. And it's really more than information, it's really a roadmap forward. So I hope you enjoy the program. Thank you all for having me.
Now let's welcome board member of San Francisco Pride, Maceo Person.
Hello, everyone. Is the mic on? Yes. Thank you all for being here. My name is Maceo Person. I use he, him pronouns. I'm the vice president for San Francisco Pride. And I'm really proud to be here tonight. I'm proud to be here as part of Pride. This is an incredibly important conversation. It's an important conversation because Pride is immigrants, and immigrants are part of Pride. I am someone who has an immigrant background as well. My mom fled a violent dictator military coup in Chile to Sweden, and then we went from Sweden to here. And part of the reason why we're having this is we want to highlight the fact that like our community members, our partners, our siblings, our parents, our kids, our family members are all going through what we're seeing today on a daily basis, are all going through a very scary time when someone's legal status is uncertain and or not existent right now. And what does that mean for your existence here and for what you can be? And knowing that, you know, this is part of Pride's community, we knew that we had to do something and put something together. And also, SF Pride has a history, right? We are a history where we are not just a celebration, but we are resistance. And that is who we are, and that is part of our history, and that we have to band together and do something. And we're standing up for each other because we have to in this moment. And just as migrants and immigrant rights are under attack, you know, LGBTQ rights are under attack, trans folks are under attack, and we need to continue to take a stand on all these issues. So that's in part why we're here, and also why we want to make sure to spotlight this conversation. And I wanted to just like highlight there's different ways that you can support immigrant rights and migrant rights, and that we're going to be able to make it visible as well throughout June and throughout Pride and throughout the year. So I wanted to invite you all to join us. So for Sunday of Pride, during the parade itself, the big main event, we have our resistance contingent. And the resistance contingent is sort of where we make our voice heard. It's the first section after Dykes on Bikes. When we march as the board of Pride, we invite everyone to come and join us and really show that resistance and show your voice and your call to action. So we want to invite people to participate in that. Then at the festival, you know, come, we're excited to announce a program where all of the donations at the gates that are taken, we are going to have a program where we support our organizations, our local nonprofits here in San Francisco from that. So come and support Pride, come and give in your donations so that we can continue to support our community. Then on Thursday of Pride Week, we have the Human Rights Summit. So I want you all to be able to participate and join us for that. So at the Human Rights Summit, we have workshops, we have sessions where we talk about these issues. We're going to talk about migration or different LGBT issues that people are facing, issues that older adults are facing who are LGBT or trans communities are facing. So this is a time, it will be held right here at the Commonwealth Club on that Thursday. So I want to invite you all to be a part of that. And then I also want to invite you on the Tuesday of Pride Week. We are having Threads of Pride, which will be our fashion show, which maybe Dr. Nas Mohammed will be able to say a little bit about. But at our fashion show, we are highlighting 9 nonprofits here in San Francisco Bay Area. And it's a call to action. It's a call to action for resistance, for you to give us, not us, but like to give organizations, give our movement your time, your money, your talent, anything that you can do to really support our community members thrive. So I wanted to do that. So Now, I want to make sure that we highlight that people are going to be here speaking today. One of the reasons we wanted to do this, and we've been mindful about having movement leaders here, is that SF Pride, we are an organization that highlights and platforms a lot of things. We are a big voice. However, we want to make sure that we center the voices from people who have been doing the work in immigrant rights organizations. So I wanted to invite some of the folks here, but first I want to say thank you, and also a huge thank you to Michelle Miao, who is both our moderator, but who's been very involved on this issue and has put in a lot of work in this. So I just wanted to thank you for your dedication and for your support. Michelle is the producer and co-host of the Michelle Miao Show on KPIX Plus, and a member of the Commonwealth Club World Affairs of California Board of Governors, and a former board president for San Francisco Pride. So thank you. And her work continuously uplifts our LGBTQ voices and catalyzes critical public dialogue. We also have Alvaro Huerta, who uses he, el, they. He's the Director of Litigation and Advocacy at Immigrant Defenders Law Center. And from impact litigation to policy advocacy, Alvaro's work is grounded in community and driven by a lifelong commitment to immigrant justice. A proud son and grandson of Mexican immigrants, his leadership spans the courts, the classroom, and the community. Then we also have Carl Takei, who serves as the Program Director for Civil Liberties and Community Safety at the Asian Law Caucus. A seasoned civil rights attorney and longtime leader in Suru for Solidarity, Carl brings deep expertise on the intersections of criminalization, immigration enforcement, and racial justice. Then we have Nneka Okeke. She, her, is the Bay Area Regional Lead at the Black LGBTQIA Migrant Project, also known as BLMP. Her work centers the experiences of Black, queer, and trans migrants, combining political education, cultural organizing, and a deeply rooted belief in joy as a form of resistance. And then we have Dr. Naz Mohammed, he, him, she, all pronouns, is a physician, activist, and community leader who made history as the first openly gay Qatari to come out publicly. He founded Osra Medical and the Alawan Foundation to provide inclusive care and support for LGBTQ plus refugees from the Gulf. His advocacy has earned global recognition, including being named Grand Marshal for San Francisco Pride, and now is also my esteemed, and I'm very glad to have him on board, Secretary for San Francisco Pride as well. So please welcome all of our panelists and for Michelle Miao.
All right, thank you all for being here with us and for doing the incredible work that you do. Let's just dive right in and have you all each briefly share with us, share with our online audience, your focus, the work that you do for your respective organizations, whether that be cases, campaigns, direct action, and so on. And so we'll start with Alvaro and come down.
Sure. Thank you, Michelle, for having me, and thank you, everybody, for coming tonight. My name is Alvaro Huerta. I'm the Director of Litigation and Advocacy at the Immigrant Defenders Law Center, also known as IMDEF. IMDEF is the largest removal defense legal service provider in California. We're based mostly out of Southern California. We have offices throughout Southern California. And we represent all types of clients, from kids to deported veterans to people with mental incapacities, everyone that needs assistance. We really follow what's called a universal representation model, which tries to ensure that everyone gets a lawyer in immigration court. Because you might not know that you're not actually legally entitled to a lawyer in court, at least not one provided by the government, despite the severe consequences of potential deportation. And some of the cases we're working on, for example, as you can imagine, with this administration, immigration is a huge issue for them, and they really have been targeting a lot of our communities. I've been working on a case, for example, where the administration has tried to take away all lawyers from unaccompanied children. Unaccompanied children are children who cross the border without a parent or legal guardian, and they are usually given a lawyer to help them in their deportation cases. But the administration has gotten rid of, or has tried to get rid of the funding. We are very lucky that in our challenge, we have at least stopped them for now, and they have to continue to provide legal services. We're also working, and we'll be talking about this a lot, on the people who were removed, the 230 plus Venezuelan people who are, I won't even say removed, because removal is a technical term that means that you were officially deported. They were disappeared. They were sent to El Salvador, to this maximum security prison, and we haven't had contact with any of them. So lots of families are really scared for their relatives. They may have seen them in the videos that were shown, and that's the only proof of life that they have for some of the folks.
Carl.
Thanks. I work at the Asian Law Caucus, which is one of the oldest legal and civil rights organizations in the country, serving low-income and immigrant communities with a special focus on Asian American and Pacific Islander communities. And we've been around for more than 50 years. We're headquartered here in San Francisco. And work across a range of issue areas, doing impact litigation, policy advocacy, direct service work, and community empowerment. My program area focuses on community safety and many of the sort of forms of national security targeting that we have seen in past administrations, including the Muslim ban in the first Trump administration, and the targeting that we're now seeing in this administration, and the efforts to erode foundational legal principles like birthright citizenship. That's one of the issues that we are litigating now, really trying to ensure that the communities that we serve are able to exercise their rights and to be able to live freely, as everybody's friends, neighbors, schoolmates, coworkers, and be able to live up to their full potential.
Nneka.
Hey, everybody. My name is Nneka Okeke, and I'm the Bay Area Regional Lead for the Black LGBT Migrant Project. And we do a lot of work when it comes to Black queer immigrants, either who have recently arrived in the country or who are the descendants of people who recently arrived in the country, which is called like a first generation person. And the main work that we do, we kind of range with a lot of things. We do a lot of work with political education. We also provide advocacy services for Black queer immigrants, regardless of documentation status. And also we mostly focus primarily also on like cultural connection and reducing isolation within our population. So we host a lot of events in terms of not only focus on community safety, but also fun. We do a lot of forms of like community building. And that's getting kind of more complicated now with this current administration because of the climate of fear that's been stoked more so with the immigration policies that have been coming through. So I'm really excited to be here today to discuss that.
Dr. Nas.
Thank you. My name is Dr. Nas Mohammed. I want to start by saying that I am an LGBT asylum seeker myself. Came here as a student and went to medical school in the United States and had to file for political asylum from my home country, Qatar. So this is a very personal experience for me. I work in different spaces. I'm a physician providing outpatient medical care, but I'm also working in different advocacy platforms. The Alwan Foundation was born when the world merged in my country in Qatar in 2022. And it was very clear that when the world gets together, they collectively don't believe LGBT rights are human rights. And I think a lot of the various forms of persecution that we see, whether they're in healthcare space or civil issues or immigration, stem from that belief system. So the Alwan Foundation was born to, first of all, contribute to the global narrative that being an LGBT person is universal and it's part of human diversity, and it exists where we're from too. And the reason we're not visible is not because we don't exist, but because we're severely persecuted. So the Alwan Foundation helps tell that story, helps people that are being persecuted. We run big campaigns, and we do a lot of case management now for people needing their cases to be defended in different countries around the world by partnering with other organizations, but also pick up some cases here in the United States and provide them some support, whether it's legal, housing, or otherwise.
Thank you so much. So, Alvaro, let's start with the Alien Enemies Act. Now, IMDEF is now involved in a case involving somebody by the name of Andre Hernandez Romero, who has been swept up in all of this. So I'm going to turn it back to you to talk to us about Alien Enemies Act, and you'll do a much better job than I just did in explaining, where we are at with this act, where the federal administration is at, where is the case now. We haven't heard updates about Kilmar. They were supposed to return him. He's not here. And then also specifically the case that IMDEF is involved in, which is Andri's case.
Yeah. So thank you, Michelle. Yeah, the Alien Enemies Act. The Trump administration invoked this, claiming that there's an invasion from Venezuela. News to me. But saying that effectively, because we're being invaded by gang members from Venezuela, he can use this act to summarily deport people without any due process. And I think that's important, right? Because it's due process here that's the kind of at issue. If the government can claim that you're a gang member without any due process, then we're all potentially subject to deportation. So the administration used this act, the Alien Enemies Act, to effectively, as I said, not remove, but disappear over 230 Venezuelans that it claimed were gang members based on a variety of things, but primarily tattoos that it had identified. So our client, Andri, is one of the many people who was disappeared to El Salvador. Andri's a 31-year-old Venezuelan gay makeup artist. He fled his country in Venezuela based on persecution of his identity and his political opinion. He came to the US and tried to cross and was sent back. And when he was sent back, he was told, you have to make an appointment. You have to use this application called CBP-1. It's an app where you can make an appointment, show up at the border, and then they'll see you and process your claim for asylum. So he did that. He did that back in May of 2024. And he was put in detention right away. That's not uncommon. Many people are put in detention when they claim asylum, but he was put in detention. And then we represented him later in the year. At some point, the government reviewing his case, said that he had tattoos that were emblematic of being a member of the Tren de Aragua gang from Venezuela. And what they saw was 2 tattoos that he has on his wrists that are crowns. They say that those crowns indicate that he's a member of this gang. Those crowns, though, say mom and dad right under them. And in Andri's case, he has those crowns because he has been a member of a theater troupe in his hometown that celebrates the Three Kings Day, which is the 3 kings that visited Jesus, right, when he was born. And so he's part of these festivals where they celebrate the 3 kings. He's dressed up as one of the kings. He's an actor in the troupe. And so we could easily prove, if we had been given the chance, that those crowns just really didn't mean anything that was related to a gang. They were just his way of honoring the 3 kings and his parents. But we didn't get that chance because in March of this year, we showed up to court, but Andri was not there. And the government would have to produce him in court. And he wasn't there. And even the government couldn't tell us initially why that was the case. But we had heard about this happening to others and then found out that the ACLU was bringing a case to try to prevent the removal of all of these people that had been staged in a facility in Texas to be sent to El Salvador, to this maximum security prison called the SECO, as it's known in Spanish, where, as you may have seen the images that were blasted kind of as an ad, really, from the campaign, showing all men shackled and kind of forced into these prisons, their heads shaved, and then put away. These are prisons where there's no bedding, there are no pillows, it's just metal kind of bunk beds we've seen from images, and they were put there. And the last that we know about Andri is a Time reporter, a reporter from Time magazine was there, a photographer, I should say, and took photos and also witnessed the people coming, these folks being imprisoned. And he remembers specifically a young man who was having his head shaved, and he was kind of pleading with the officers. He was saying, "There's been a mistake. I'm gay. I'm a makeup artist." And then he was pleading for his mom. And the Times photographer said that he was being slapped in response. That's the last we've actually heard of anyone has heard of Andriy. Since then, his case has gotten some attention, which is great. We've had Congress members, even Congressmember Garcia from Long Beach in Southern California, traveled down to El Salvador with a few other Congress members and asked just for a wellness check to see if if he's okay, if he's alive. And also recently at a congressional hearing where the Secretary of Homeland Security, Kristi Noem, was being interviewed, he asked her to plead, he was pleading with her on behalf of Andriy's mom to at least ask the government of El Salvador to check on him to make sure he's alive. And she refused. The administration has basically done a very hands-off thing saying that you have to ask the president of El Salvador. We have nothing to do with this anymore, basically, disclaiming any kind of responsibility here. But as Michelle mentioned, there are cases going through the courts. The case that has been getting a lot of attention is Kilmar's case, and that went all the way up. These cases on the Alien and Enemies Act went all the way up to the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court did say you have to facilitate the return of Kilmar. But the government, again, has said it's not their responsibility. They can't really do anything. They can't tell the president of El Salvador what to do. Mind you, the government has paid the president of El Salvador $6 million to house these people. So they have some kind of control. They can, if they wanted to, bring everybody back.
Really, really hard to process it all. Which a lot of what you're talking about, brings me back to this thing in the back of my mind about the Constitution. And actually, the Alien Enemies Act, if you think about it, this we've seen this in history. And so, Carl, I'd love for you to add, your thoughts about Alien Enemies Act.
Yeah, the history is personal for me because I'm a Japanese American. My great-grandfather, Joro Shiga, came to the United States as an immigrant in 1904, it is connected to this history of the abuse of the Alien Enemies Act. He came here to seek a better life. He opened a successful sweater knitting business that thrived in Seattle. He raised his 5 children to adulthood. He grieved the death of his wife before the war. And then when World War II broke out, about a month later, in January 1942, 2 FBI agents showed up at his door and arrested him under the authority of this same act that Alvaro is talking about being used today. And at that time, it was an actual war, but the abuses were very similar. That he and thousands of other Japanese American immigrants were never allowed to go before a court of law and argue that they were not threats, that they could be released. And the logic of that first wave of FBI arrests of so-called enemy aliens, helped foster the broader logic of the roundup of 120,000 Japanese Americans, citizens and non-citizens together. And that's something that now is recognized as one of the greatest civil liberties violations in our history. But at the time, it is this allowing people to be arrested and disappeared without due process based on all of these group-based ideas about who might be a threat that allowed that logic to keep expanding and expanding and expanding. And I think I and many other Japanese American descendants are really concerned about how this logic could expand. One of the things that the Justice Department has done now is issued an internal memo that has been reported on, stating that the invocation of the act allows the FBI to go door to door and search people's houses without warrants, to arrest people with less than probable cause, which is what you are supposed to, that is supposed to be the standard for arresting people. This is an authority that has no limit if it is not stopped by the courts.
Yeah. Neko, Dr. Naz, would you like to add anything to the conversation around this? I obviously, we all feel targeted. We actually brought that up earlier today where, if you look here on site, I know a lot of people had responded. They want to be a part of the conversation, but there's real fear. There's real fear, for a lot of folks. So you could probably add a whole lot to this as being a target and in fear.
Yeah, like I was going through my asylum case during the first Trump administration, during the Muslim ban, and like the being of Middle Eastern background, like we're often labeled as people that would bring terror unless proven otherwise. And I find myself on the defense more often, and a lot of Middle Eastern immigrants, especially here, the ones I'm working with, definitely feel targeted for more than one reason. They flee persecution based on their sexual orientation and gender identity or religious belief system on one side, but then now they find themselves targeted and dehumanized for something else, for their racial background. Mm-hmm. And I think this is where our shared experience comes in, because we all see each other in the patterns we're being persecuted and share similar concerns. And I think all of our communities hold that.
Ooh, I definitely want to add on to that, particularly when it comes to Black queer immigrants, particularly those who are undocumented. It's like the culture of fear and the climate of that has gotten higher, because initially there's the persecution that we face by being Black, and then there's persecution that we face by being immigrants just in general, and then also being queer. But now that we're in the state with increased surveillance when it comes to immigrant populations, the acceptance of no due process when it comes to deportation, even questioning your immigration status. And now the fact that it just seemingly is considered to be acceptable now. The fear and the anxiety that I've been seeing throughout my community has risen in ways that I've never seen before. And it just feels so particularly unfair because we already go through so much. And then we add now this new thing where it's challenging our survival. And it's just, I'm trying to keep my composure, but it just feels like there's attacks on multiple ends. Either due to our race, and now it's due to our immigration status. And the protections that were there before just don't seem like they're there now.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I'm going to go back to the Constitution and these attacks on us as human beings here and our existence. It's like this question of who has the right to exist. I don't bring it back to a topic that is making the headlines again, right? Because these cases are being heard, and it's the case affecting, or the conversation around birthright citizenship. Mm-hmm. So, Carl, you had mentioned that earlier. I know Asian Law Caucus is working on the cases and the arguments around this. Talk to us about the recent arguments regarding birthright citizenship. Where are we at with that?
Yeah, so this is one of the first executive orders that the Trump administration issued, and it purported to deny birthright citizenship to anybody who has not got either a U.S. citizen or a green card holding parent. And I just want to stop and explain what the effects of that are. It means that if you are born to grad students who come here on a student visa, you are not a citizen. It means that if you are born to parents who came here seeking asylum and who were granted asylum status because they were fleeing danger in their home countries, you are not a citizen. It means that if you are born to people who are crime victims and got special visas called U or T visas that are given to people who are crime victims and cooperate with the investigations of the crimes against them, you are not a citizen. And this also extends, it requires the creation of a whole apparatus of citizenship verification so that even if you are born to 2 US citizens, it means that suddenly, instead of just being an American, the way that it has been since the end of the Civil War, you have to prove your citizenship. So it is an illegal effort to rewrite who gets to be an American. And that's really dangerous. It is flatly unconstitutional. Every court that has heard the challenges to the birthright citizenship order across multiple districts in the country, including the case filed by the Asian Law Caucus, the cases filed by different state attorney generals and other entities, that every case has held that this is unconstitutional. And what the federal government is trying to do is argue in the Supreme Court that even though they have lost all of these cases on the core issue of the constitutionality of this order, that there shouldn't be a nationwide order barring them from enforcing this illegal order. Instead, that every baby who is born in the United States has to bring their case to the Supreme Court in order to have their individual case adjudicated. And this is going to create chaos if this is allowed to stand. And that's what the stakes were. This case has been argued at the Supreme Court, and it's currently waiting to be decided.
We're going to take your questions in just a few minutes, and so our volunteers will come around for those question cards. So thanks for those who have submitted so far. Speaking of the fear and the chaos, it's here, right? So the fear and chaos, it's there on college campuses. We've seen that there at the airports, people coming in and out. I mean, people, even traveling on valid visas, people with green card status or lawful permanent residency who, for whatever reason, I mean, a lot of it is also uncertain or unknown, are being affected. Nneka, you had mentioned there's tons of fear and chaos. The fear and chaos is actually even here. We've had a lot of people who say we can't physically be there. We can only tune in online. We cannot be there because we are living in fear. Share with us, just what you're experiencing, what your community members are telling you or sharing with you. Dr. Naz, we'll start with you and just kind of share what are some of the things you're hearing and seeing, such as like the people who are writing to you.
So in my seat where I sit down and help and support LGBT people specifically, I know the topic is broader here perhaps today, but I focus on LGBT individuals fleeing persecution. And I do interact with them being in fear, both locally and internationally. Sometimes people have the fear that they're about to lose their civil rights and their ability to remain employed. Sometimes they have the fear they're going to be found out that they're different and be hurt. And sometimes they're actively hunted down. And I do take on cases where people have been disappeared, but been taken to detention, where they go through various abuse methods in detention. I have written some reports on that with the Human Rights Watch. I have also worked on campaigns where people were disappeared and awareness was needed to just bring their right stakeholders in to help with the case. But then I also interact with some of the people here that have managed to come in either as refugees or immigrants and filed for asylum, like came in through other different various programs and filed for asylum, and now fear that their status will be challenged and they would be discriminated against due to another trait that they have, like their ethnic background, and sent back out. So what I'm hearing from my communities here is that they need more help, they need more resources, they need more advocacy, they need more protection. And unfortunately, what's going on is that the demand has increased significantly this year, and their resources are less, and the legal framework to protect them is challenged. And it feels like an entrapment, frankly, for a lot of them.
Nneka.
I definitely want to add on to that, particularly when it comes to Black queer immigrants. The things that I've been seeing and hearing have been actually very disturbing. We've definitely have had members in the past who have either been deported or have been detained. We have had members that have had to use our advocacy services to prevent that option. We've had our participants and people and our members who have had to go through the asylum process. But before Donald Trump did whatever he wanted to do, there was more avenues and resources to be able to kind of stoke some of those fears, even when the people were going through these harrowing situations. Now that we're here, not only is there less resources to be able to do that, it's having direct effects on not only people's personal lives, economic lives, psychologically, emotionally. Like the things that I've been just witnessing has just been like the lack of like security now that is present is just, there's just no words to really describe it. I've had to have a conversation with a couple of people who now are terrified of their parents being deported. So they are now coming up with resources, like having like a community susu to be able to pay someone's mother's rent so their mother doesn't have to take the risk of going to work and thus being deported. That's not something that in the 30 years I've been here I have ever heard of. But it's now these do or die survival methods that people are doing now. I've also been seeing more engagement in like underground economies, because not only has this immigration crisis been affecting people's sense of safety, but the fact that now the economy is also shifting too is also kind of contributing to that. So things that I haven't seen before have been showing up now. Mutual aid requests have skyrocketed because BLMP has also provided mutual aid. So our mutual aid requests have skyrocketed. It just seems like even 4 or 5 years ago, even during Donald Trump's first presidency, it felt like there was a cult. Everyone was afraid, but the way that things are now, it just seems like not only is there incredible confusion, but just fear. And what people need now, like you had mentioned, we need resources, but we also need a sense of protection. It just feels like so many people are just falling in line. So the idea of, okay, well, I have this right here, so maybe this won't go as bad. That sense of security is not there anymore. So it's just been affecting people in just these very deep and profound ways. And I just wish we talked about it more. Yeah.
I'm going to jump into questions just because I think, right, it'll spill out in your answers, all of your answers really. And this is a great question because I think what we're talking about is the attack on the American Constitution, what we're founded upon, or attack on, human rights in a lot of ways, violations of human rights, right? And so that whole argument of, well, we're going to go after folks who are breaking the law, they're violent criminals and all that stuff. I mean, that's just not the conversation anymore. And so this is a question from the audience, but how can we get to this place where, I guess the Supreme Court, but maybe in general, where we decide cases on merit instead of talking about who has standing, or like, it almost feels so subjective that the administration gets to decide who is here, who's not, like we had talked about, what's considered a quote unquote crime. I mean, at this point, we don't know, what the crime actually is for people who are being deported or detained and in very violent and unsafe conditions. So maybe Carl and or Alvaro, you can jump in on this one.
I'll start. I think one thing that's interesting about what the administration is doing this time that it didn't do last time, it made the same promises as last time, right? I'm going to make immigration my top issue, and I'm going to deport huge numbers of people. But I think the difference this time is that the administration is creating undocumented people. There are people who have who have legal status here, right? TPS, temporary protected status, or humanitarian parole. And the administration is snatching that away from them. So these are people that did what the administration says it wants them to do. It wants them to have legal status, go the legal route, get in line, et cetera. They had some status, and this administration has now kind of swept the rug out from under them, right? And it's creating this population that it can then now target to deport. So that I think is part of the fear too, is that there's no one who is safe because even now your legal status is in question. And again, I go back to, if that's true for someone who has legal status, what's it going to take to eventually get to folks who are citizens or have lawful permanent residency, right? It's just one step closer to that. And I think that is what's driving a lot of this fear, at least for me, and something that we really have to fight back now, because if they can do that to someone with legal status, then yeah, they can do it to anyone.
I think the other thing that is important to name is that the administration this time around is targeting many of the institutions that created barriers to their efforts to take away people's rights and to destroy people's lives the last time around. Mm-hmm. So, law firms are a major example of that. There are all of these, major law firms that around the country provided what's called pro bono legal assistance, free legal assistance to impact litigation, like the kinds of litigation that we're talking about in the first Trump administration. And this time around, the administration has been targeting those law firms and trying to use executive orders to shut down their businesses and to make it hard for them to operate if they file cases that challenge the unlawful actions of the Trump administration. And that has made our work tremendously more difficult. There are some law firms that are standing up to this pressure. An increasing number are. And there are some that I should call out in San Francisco. Kecker & Van Nest was one of the first law firms to stand up to this pressure. But what it requires is for the law firms and all of these other aspects of civil society that are being put under pressure right now to stand together and not choose to try and accommodate the tactics of the administration to shut down its opposition and to prevent people from using legal avenues and other avenues to challenge the wrongs that they're committing in our communities.
On a call, Alvaro, I think, we were having a long, lengthy discussion, and in the end we said, so what is it that we need to do? And you had said, well, we need to try to do something so that the government, I can't believe you said it, but so that the government stops breaking the law. I don't know how you do that.
Yeah, it's tough, right? And I think we need these law firms and the nonprofit communities to challenge any chance we get the administration. We can't let up. That's true for any governmental administration, right? Not just the Trump administration. We were there challenging the Biden administration when it did things that affected our communities. We have to do that no matter what. And I think we have to stay vigilant for any government that tries to take away people's rights. And the only way that you protect rights is to protect rights, right? The only way you keep your rights is to protect them. So I think it's really important that we raise the alarm whenever some community needs us. We all need to turn and help that community. And then do it to the next one and continue to raise the alarm and not be passive here, because I think that's the biggest threat, is that this administration wants folks to kind of throw their hands up in the air. There's so much that they're throwing against the wall, seeing what sticks, and so many communities that they're targeting that they want people to feel frustrated and tired. And we are frustrated and tired, but we have to continue fighting. I like to say that one of the favorite parts of my job is that I feel like I'm doing something. I'm actually actively fighting when the government is trying to take away our community's rights. So I feel kind of privileged that I get to go to work and sue the president maybe that day. And I think we all need to do, obviously not all of us are going to sue the president, but we can all do something that will just at least stem the tide that they're trying to roll us over with.
Anyone want to add to that?
I want to borrow a little bit from my doctor world, because the question in its essence is about what do we do when we're facing hardship and in the presence of uncertainty. And in my doctor world, we break it down to smaller components, because sometimes we approach somebody that's ill, quite ill, and we don't have the answer. And then we just break that down into smaller bits that supports them and centers them. Because even though you don't know what's making the person ill, you can still listen to them to make sure their symptoms are managed. You can make sure that they can function and do the things that they need to do. You can also listen to them to make sure that their spirituality and mental health, the human, is still intact as they go through illness. And I think right now, in this time of hardship and uncertainty, we can do the same thing to our community. We can break this down and make sure people's basic needs are being met. We need a mechanism to gather feedback in real time and hear what's working and what's not working. We need to see how we're organizing and evaluate if the ways we're organizing are effective or if we need to restructure. And then we need to support the people that are fighting back.
Definitely.
Thank you, Dr. Nost. Anyone else? Becca?
Ooh, I definitely want to add on to that, just a quick little thing. I think we also forget like some of the most basic things of like just people power. We just have to commune with each other, because the part of like fascism and oppression is isolation. And that's how it thrives when people think that they're by themselves. So the biggest part I feel like at the base of this is that we really have to rely on each other. We have to be able to connect with each other. We have to be able to commune with each other. We have to be willing to give some of the resources that we have in exchange with each other. We have to think about larger conversations of like what mutual aid looks like. We have to think about like what happens and like how speaking up looks like. If you're afraid to do it as yourself as one person, let's see what happens if you can get 2 or 3, particularly if you're not as vulnerable as other members of your community. Like we have to start thinking about those conversations, because I think that's the only way we're going to be able to survive the next 4 years. Sincerely.
Carl, anything? I only look to you as, you brought up some historical context too, but I don't know, like even for my generation, I don't think we thought about this where we'd be back here in which we're seeing even violations of the Constitution by our own government and, highest leaders in power, right, who are doing it. You feel powerless.
Yeah, I mean, one thing that I do is I think a lot about my ancestors. There were a surprising number of people who, inside the World War II Japanese-American prison camps, resisted and protested. They were met with violence inside, but they had lost everything. They were in a much worse situation than any of us are up on the stage right now, and they still fought for their rights, and they still engaged in collective action, and I think earlier this year, like I went to a protest along with other members of Sudo for Solidarity, which is, we bring together Japanese American survivors and descendants of the World War II incarceration. And, I was out there like protesting with grandmas to try and stop FCI Dublin, which is a federal prison that's notorious for sexual abuse, got shut down after lengthy litigation and a lot of protesting and collective action outside. There has been a proposal to reopen the prison as ICE detention, and we were out there joining with many others from different ethnic communities to protest and try and stop Dublin from being reopened as ICE detention. And so far it hasn't reopened, and I think it was magical to feel the power of everybody there, including these survivors of the World War II incarceration.
Collective, right, like meaning together, building a coalition. It's what we're trying to do here, building power, linking arms. We're going to come back to the solidarity part, as our last question. So this question, it says, why aren't all immigrants, who are challenged by ICE provided a lawyer? Did a court approve that? I think, a lot of people don't know. I mean, I think that's the point, is to not give the opportunity for, following here any kind of rule or law or, you pick it up where I'm leaving it off. Anyone here on the panel, if you'd like to address that question.
I mean, I guess I'll start with kind of just how we got here in terms of immigrants not having that right to lawyers. Unfortunately, the courts have found that because immigration is considered civil law, it's not, when you are here undocumented, you haven't violated a criminal law. So, normally we have this right to attorneys if we're in criminal court, but we don't have a right in immigration court, at least not one provided by the government. You do have a right to an attorney if you can provide for that attorney yourself. And the courts have said that that's okay because you're in civil court, you're not in criminal court. And again, despite the fact that the consequences are pretty severe, especially if you're being deported to a country where you might be persecuted or have no economic means whatsoever, it can be a death sentence in many cases. But that's kind of the situation we have where most immigrants don't have an attorney in court. And it makes a huge difference to have an attorney. The reports and stats are there. Immigrants who are represented are far more likely to actually get relief and be able to stay in the country if they're in removal proceedings. It's just a fact. And you can see why, because an attorney is going to understand what you're eligible for. They can make the arguments in court. They can argue with the government on the other side. If you have to do that all by yourself, chances are you're not going to win. And imagine, as I mentioned, being a child, which is what this government is trying to do now. Make children who don't have a parent or a lawful legal guardian represent themselves in court, taking away the lawyers, as Carl said, right? Taking away the protection that they might have. Now we have children who have to represent themselves in court. So it's just, it boggles the mind, the cruelty that this administration has kind of come up with. But that's what they're trying to do. They're trying to take away the protection that folks have and take advantage of the fact that the law is complicated. Immigration law is especially complicated. And chances are, if you're not represented, you're going to lose.
Yeah, I mean, one thing I want to make sure that folks understand is that immigration law, as it has existed, is not an easy or fair system to navigate. For many people who have lived and worked in the United States for decades, there is no viable path to gaining U.S. citizenship under current law, that's something that is how the law operated under the Obama administration, the first Trump administration, the Biden administration, and this current Trump administration. The thing that is changing is that they are taking a system that was already monstrously difficult to navigate, and like engaging in all of these sweeping illegal actions, like for Venezuelans, removing what's called temporary protected status. At a sweep, tens of thousands of people who had legal status in this country suddenly losing it with the stroke of a pen, so that's something that it is important to keep in mind that the baseline that we were starting with was not great in the first place.
Anything else, Dr. Naz, Nneka, before we wind down?
Maybe it's just a quick thought process that's been in my head, and the thought's a little still baking, so forgive me. It just seems like the goalpost has always moved when it comes to the immigration system. First, it was, well, there's a certain amount of group of people that are overrepresented in terms of immigration cases, so we need to now kind of cull their applications. So now they have to go through a couple of extra hoops to be able to even just apply. Now it's, well, we can change the definition of asylum and say, even though you're going through these horrifically violent things, we can make sure that you have to prove something a little extra, just a little extra razzle-dazzle to prove your humanity, to be able to even apply for these cases. It just seems like the goalpost, like the immigration system was already completely messed up beforehand. But now the goalposts have moved to a point where even the most affluent and the most privileged immigrants are going to have a hard time being able to get basic things like student visas, and then up to eventually green cards. It's just, it doesn't make entirely a lot of sense to me, but then I also understand that this is how the system is designed, and it's designed for this reason, because we're determining who has the human right to essentially move, which is a human right, and who is considered human enough to do it.
Yeah, and right now, as if I may just jump in, and now in that process of defining who's human enough to move, being LGBT is being challenged a lot as basis for asylum in so many parts of the world, and it's a huge crisis for our community because right now a lot of us are targeted, especially gender-based violence is increasing a lot, and taking people's ability to escape dangerous situation is inhumane. And I think it really creates a crisis. So although we're talking about immigration and immigration law here, it's just so hard to separate it when you're talking about the well-being of an LGBT person, because it's just so interconnected to everything. For example, people are not showing up to their clinics now because they're worried about being deported. And then you start this spiral of like mental health issues, physical health issues, and then psychosocial issues, and then it's just this tornado that ends up impacting a person, and it's hard for them to come back from that. So this issue is really critical, I think, to address. And I love what we're doing here. I love that we're sitting down and talking about it, because I know we're overwhelmed in our spaces, but being in silos sometimes make us lose perspective. And it's helpful to hold more conversations, I think, and sit in the room with people that are touching the same life in different contexts to see what's working and what's not.
We've got about 5 minutes left, and I do want to leave with the question of how we come together for our community. But I'll summarize, just the last 2 questions, and it has to do with immigration. But the question was around where in the world is there a model for us here that's based off, I guess, what is the best model? To me, is a human right. But the reason why we have migrants and asylum seekers, it's not for the human right to do so. It's forced.
And I think that's part of the answer too, right? The right to stay as well is important, right? To stay in your own community, to be able to stay in your home. Most people don't want to leave their home and migrate thousands of miles away if they can help it, right? So the part of it is this international issue of like, how are we helping people also stay? How are we making sure that countries have the economic wherewithal to keep their citizens happy, and we have opportunity there, that we're getting rid of persecution. We're really fighting for human rights across the world, because I agree, people do have a right to move and should have a right to move, but they also have a right to stay where they are.
I think the other thing, turning it back to the question of solidarity, people like Andre, they are our neighbors, they're our coworkers. They are individual members of our communities. And you don't have to be a lawyer to stand with people who are asserting their rights. You don't have to be a lawyer to fight back against ICE's efforts to encroach on our communities, to build new detention centers, to assert new powers in our communities. One of the things the San Francisco Board of Supervisors recently reaffirmed the city's commitment to sanctuary. And it is lawyers, yes, in the city attorney's office, but led by elected officials who are litigating to ensure that San Francisco can maintain its status as a sanctuary city without having to fear loss of federal funding. And so, I'll name David Chu as the city attorney. He's an elected official who is showing a lot of bravery by leading that lawsuit. And, we, as just ordinary people, we have a role in ensuring that our elected officials can show that kind of backbone.
Mm-hmm. Well, we didn't even get to sanctuary cities. Told you it was a lot. This is one part of many, we hope, that we can address this. But very, very quickly, does anybody want to chime in here about sanctuary cities and solidarity? I mean, it sounds like what we need to do is when we have elected leaders who are willing to stand up for sanctuary city policy, we should support them. But we should note that elected leaders are under attack as well. We've heard a congresswoman who was arrested, a judge has been arrested, mayor of Newark was arrested. So, if anybody wants to chime in terms of how we show up in solidarity for folks who are going to stand up in this way too, chime in.
I just have maybe a quick thought, a quick sentence. Solidarity and allyship are not the same. And that's and I think that's like one big part when it comes to like, I guess, these larger conversations of like, how do we form coalition? How do we move? And I feel like when it comes to the concept of like allyship, it's when people who may not necessarily be a part of that community, but they are kind of staying on the sidelines to show support for the people who are fighting. But we're kind of thinking about things like right now, like this is a huge bully, and there's one person who's essentially fighting the bully by themselves, and then there's a person standing on the sidelines like, okay, we got you. No, you gotta, like, if you have whatever privileges you have, you gotta help jump in too, because that's how we can form solidarity when it comes to these things. And that's probably the only way that we're going to be able to create like certain traction with this when it comes to not even just winning, but just now survival.
Yeah. I 100% agree. Like, although we're the ones invited to like stage to speak, like, please don't feel like you can't be part of this. You are, all of you listening to this are part of this. And you have to take action. All of us have to. It's our civil duty to protect each other. And we will all feel safer in each other's company if we step up when we see one of us being dehumanized for any reason. If we get closer to that, where we know we're safe among each other, I think we would be in a much better place. And I don't think we're there at this moment in time. I think that's why a lot of people are afraid. They feel like other people will just watch them be like disappeared, or watch them be abused, or watch them be marginalized, and their own neighbors will just be sitting back and watching things happen to them, either thinking it's not their problem or thinking that there's somebody else out there that's it's their job to go and protect them. But it's our job to do that, all of us together.
And just to end, before we thank you so much again for your work, just remind folks where they can build that, coalition and be linking arms in solidarity and being active in protecting our Constitution and human rights. So, Alvaro, just go down very quickly, name the website or where the people can show their support.
Sure. I think people should start at freeandri.org. We've placed a lot of information about Andri's case, connecting it to the other cases of folks who were removed, disappeared to El Salvador, and ways that you can take action, right? Because I think the most important thing right now, especially as we're going into Pride Month, and using Andri's story to really tell the story of what's happening to folks, both those who are sent and those who are potentially in danger of being sent. So go to freeandri.org, get more information there. I started by saying Andri is a 31-year-old gay Venezuelan. It's his birthday tomorrow. He's going to turn 32 in a prison in El Salvador. So it's really important that we get his story out there, as it's just emblematic of what's happening to too many people.
Yeah, so in my day job, I'm a lawyer at the Asian Law Caucus, asianlawcaucus.org, and I'm also, involved as a volunteer in my spare time at Suru for Solidarity, which is at suruforsolidarity.org, TSURU.
So if you want to get more information in terms of like expanding mutual aid, particularly for Black queer immigrants, please visit blmp.org. And from there, use that as a launch pad to figure out the paths that make sense to you.
I'll use this moment to put a plug in for San Francisco Pride, activating through this platform this year to protect our nonprofit organizations through a campaign called #WalkWithUs. This one is meant to activate people that are not sure how to support LGBT causes, and we're asking them to give treasure, time, or talent, pick a step, pick a cause. And if you don't know what that cause is and what step you're going to take, you can just sign our pledge, and we will put you in front of the organizations that need support. That effort will be symbolized by a fashion runway show this year as an official fundraiser for San Francisco Pride, where the nonprofits would be human on the runway, and you will help them protect their own humanity. So you can find more information on sfpride.org.
Let's give a big, huge round of applause for all of our speakers who are here with us today. Thank you so much for your work, and we will be there and build solidarity. And thanks to all of you who've joined us online. Please join us in building this coalition. This is not the end of this conversation, and of course, we hope that there will be many. Let's go out there and let's link arms. We've got just some nice beverages and some pizza provided by San Francisco Pride. Thank you so much. And a huge special thanks to Suzanne Ford, the executive director of San Francisco Pride. You know, when we got the call to say we've got to do something, there's a gay makeup artist who was put on that plane illegally, unlawfully, or unconstitutionally, a violation of their human rights. You know, this organization said this is a bigger conversation in which we must bring our entire communities together as it impacts all of us. So it's we're not free until we are all free. I want to thank also the San Francisco Human Rights Commission for supporting the work of the Commonwealth Club World Affairs of California. Of course, thanks to the club. And last but not least, thank all of you for being here, for hearing us out. We'll see you out there. We'll see you next time.